Hello everyone. Year 772 BC. The city of Olympia in Greece witnesses the first ever Olympics. Athletes from every corner of Greece participate in the only event of the game, a 192-meter foot race. Behind the success of this event are two key figures whom the history remembers forever: Hercules and his father called Zeus. Over time, the Greeks introduced more sports such as running, wrestling, pentathlon, boxing, chariot racing, and the most brutal one of all, pancration. In fact, this was so brutal that participants could even kill each other. The Greeks then worked really hard to keep these games going for the next 1,000 years until something puts an end to these games in 392 AD. But then, a historical event plays a key role in marking the beginning of modern Olympics. What do Hercules and Zeus do that history remembers them for ages? What's the storyline between ancient and modern Olympics? Why are the Olympic Games held every 4 years? What do the Olympic rings and the olive wreath mean? Why were the games split into winter and summer categories? The questions go on. Let's dive in and explore. Our journey begins during a Greek mythological era known as the Golden Age. These were the times where a powerful race of gods called the Titans used to rule the world. The Titans were the first generation of divine gods, with 12 major Titans born to Gaia, the goddess of earth, and Uranus, the god of the sky. Now we are solely going to focus on these two siblings here, Cronus and Rhea, because these two are at the heart of the Olympian saga. Now pay close attention here because everything adds up to the modern Olympic traditions we are following. Cronus and Rhea together have 6 children: Hera, Poseidon, Hades, Demeter, Hestia, and Zeus. One day Uranus, the father of Cronus, warns him saying he will be overthrown by one of his own children. And panicked, he thinks, well, my father could be right, but am I safe from him in the first place? So he overthrows his own father first and then swallows each of his first 5 children at birth. Crazy, right? So, what happens to the sixth child? Because Rhea, tired of losing her children, hatches a very clever plan with the help of her mother Gaia. When Zeus is born, they trick Cronus with a rock wrapped in swaddling clothes. Cronus blindly thinks it's the baby Zeus and swallows the rock instead. Now, here's where it gets very interesting. Gaia and Rhea take Zeus to the island of Crete and bring him up in secret. Once he's old enough, he leaves the island to rescue his siblings with a clever plan. He approaches his father Cronus and gives him an emetic, a medicine that causes vomiting. So Cronus ends up expelling all the children he had swallowed, and thus Zeus successfully manages to rescue his siblings. So after rescuing his siblings, Zeus teams up with his brothers Poseidon and Hades and declares a war on Cronus. It's called the War of Titanomachy and lasts for nearly 10 years. Zeus and his allies win this war and establish a new group of gods known as the Olympians. The Olympians then go and settle on a mountain called Mount Olympus. They then pick a lord to decide on their king, and Zeus picks up the winning lord and thus becomes the king of Mount Olympus. Now let's focus our attention to one of Zeus's many children named Heracles. Heracles is a legendary figure renowned for his extraordinary feats and heroism. The Romans refer to him as Hercules, a name you might be more familiar with, so let's stick to Hercules going forward. So our hero Hercules was well built and was an amazing athlete. His father Zeus had helped him win many battles, often intervening with his mighty lightning bolts to protect him and turn the wars in his favor. Now, because of his father's immense role in his victories, Hercules decides to honor him by staging some competitive sports for the first time in a city called Olympia in 776 BC. This marks the beginning of first Olympic Games. Why Olympia and not any other cities? Because Olympia was a major religious sanctuary dedicated to Zeus and was also located at the center of Greece, making it accessible for people from various parts of the country. Now, for the Greeks, the games weren't just a sporting event, but a religious festival to unite them together. In these games, there were no team sports, and the athletes used to compete unclothed to celebrate the human body and to avoid any unfair advantages with the clothing. Also, sadly, women were not allowed to compete or even attend in any of the ancient Olympic Games. And you might be stunned to know the brutality of some of these ancient Olympic sports. Talking about pancration, this game combined wrestling and boxing, where even neck holds and strangling were permitted. Athletes used to fight until the last man standing, and some were even ready to die rather than accept the defeat. Also, there were no gold, silver, or bronze medals. The only award to the winner was the olive wreath called Cotino, which symbolized peace and victory. The wreath had a special connection to the god Zeus because its leaves came off the wild olive tree present in Mount Olympus. The olive wreath tradition resumed in modern Olympics too, but because the tradition of giving away medals began and that medals carried more importance to winning, they completely stopped handing over olive wreath since 2004 Athens Games. Anyway, after the very first games, the Greeks make a decision to hold these sports every 4 years. Why four? Well, firstly, the Greeks believed that the gods had their own rhythms and schedules, and the 4 year cycle perfectly matched to honor the god Zeus. Secondly, they wanted to maintain consistency with other festivals they were celebrating, such as the Pythian Games and the Nemean Games, which were also held every 4 years. Thirdly, organizing these games required substantial time to plan resources, including building infrastructure, making travel arrangements, and they thought 4 years sounds perfect to buy them the time that they need. And finally, the 4 year cycle aligned with their agricultural calendar and seasons, such as planting and harvesting of crops. So these 4 year cycles, named as the Olympiads, become a standard measure of time between two successful Olympic Games. FYI, the recent Paris Olympics belong to the 33rd Olympiad. I will explain more about this later. Anyway, the Olympic Games run non-stop from 776 BC through to 392 AD for approximately 1,000 years until the Roman Emperor Theodosius I decides to stop them. Why? To him, these games were not just sports, they were deeply tied to paganism or any belief system considered outside of Christianity. And Theodosius wanted to spread Christianity throughout his empire, so he saw Olympics as a threat for his motives. And that's it. The Olympic Games won't be played for another 1500 years. But then our story takes a fascinating turn with a person named Pierre de Coubertin. Pierre was a French educator and a historian, and he was deeply influenced by the ancient Greek traditions, their emphasis on physical education, and the role of sport in schooling. What really affects Pierre is the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, where France had been left deeply humiliated. On one hand, Pierre gets convinced that he should promote international peace and unity to prevent wars like this in the first place, but on the other hand, by getting the required physical training, he wants to ensure that his country is ready for any potential enemy threats. With this, Pierre embarks on a mission to resurrect these legendary games. Pierre organizes an international congress in Paris in 1894, which leads to the creation of the International Olympic Committee, or the IOC. Pierre, along with other members of Congress, unanimously choose Athens to stage the first Olympic Games in 1896. The committee proposes that the Games be held every 4 years in accordance with ancient Greek traditions, and the Olympiad cycles officially commence. The first Olympiad lasts from 1896 to 1899, the second one lasts from 1900 to 1903, and thus the Paris Olympics would form part of the 33rd Olympiad lasting from 2024 to 2027. Now, coming back to Pierre, now that he has achieved a major milestone, he decides the games should have their unique brand representation through a logo. Remember Pierre's ideology, which was to unite the world and promote peace together? He decides his logo should consist of circles because circles have no beginning or end, thus, they symbolize infinity and continuity. This perfectly aligned with his ideas of promoting a continuous and never-ending bond between different nations. Next, he needs to decide on how many circles. He wants the logo to represent 5 inhabited continents for international representation. So he draws 5 rings on a piece of paper using hand. Then he thinks of adding colors to those rings. He chooses 5 colors that were present in every national flag in the world at that time. Blue for Europe, yellow for Asia, black for Africa, green for Oceania, and red for the Americas. Now the last question that remains is how to arrange these rings. He interlocks them to symbolize the unity and bond between different nations coming together. On 6th August 1913, he writes a letter to Godefroy de Bouillon, a member of the IOC, highlighting the fundamental values of the Olympics: promotion of physical education, fair play, and the spirit of competition. At the top left corner, he includes his hand-drawn Olympic logo, and is the first time ever the Olympic rings make a public appearance. They decide to introduce this flag at the 1916 Olympic Games in Berlin, but the Games will be cancelled due to the First World War. So they introduce it at the 7th Olympic Games in Antwerp in 1920. The logo then undergoes some minor modifications. In 1957, two lower rings are moved slightly downwards for further clarity. In 1986, the IOC updates its graphic standard, defining what the exact spacing should be between different rings. In 2010, the IOC decides to revert to PA's original design, where the interlocking of the rings was clearly defined without these wide spaces in between. And this is the Olympic logo that we are seeing today. Going back to 1920s, the popularity of the Olympics grows, and it becomes clear that not all sports could be held in a single season. Winter sports such as skiing, ice skating, snowboarding, and ice hockey required colder climates and specific conditions that were different from those needed for summer games. Also, separating the Olympics into two distinct events would allow for greater global participation. The countries with colder climates, such as Norway and Canada, could showcase their athletes and sports on an equal international stage. From a cultural and an economical perspective, hosting them in both seasons became a significant opportunity for the countries to promote tourism, infrastructure development, and international diplomacy. Therefore, the IOC finally decides to split the Olympic Games into summer and winter categories. And in 1924, the first Winter Olympics are held in Chamonix in France. This marks the formal separation of the summer and winter games. Now that we know how the modern Olympic Games were revived, what led to the creation of Paralympics and the lesser known Youth Olympic Games? Also, if you look at the medal tally from Paris 2024, why do the same countries consistently top the charts? What sets them apart from the rest? Is Olympics truly worth it given the countries spending billions of dollars behind these games? Let's dive into these questions more in part 2 of the video in roughly a week's time. By the way, this was my first video, and I'm planning on sharing more informative content like this in the coming months. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Stay curious, stay inspired, and let's explore more together. Thanks for watching.